What's up, Green Bay Packers fans? Welcome back. As always, thank you for joining me. My name is Paul Brettel. Today we're going to discuss Green Bay Packers injury report heading into their playoff matchup with the Philadelphia Eagles. Specifically, we're going to focus on two players, Evan Williams, Quay Walker, both of whom are listed as questionable. But before we dive in, you know what to do. Hit like on the video, hit subscribe on the YouTube channel. I greatly appreciate it. Follow me on Twitter at Paul_Brettel. Find all my work, including article versions of what we're discussing here today and so much more over at ESPNLacrosse.com. My Wisconsin sports radio fans, Packers, Brewers, Bucks, Badgers, download the 105.5 ESPN Lacrosse app. Your Wisconsin sports radio needs each day of the week. So like I said, we're going to focus here on Evan Williams, Quay Walker, both of whom have missed the last few weeks due to injuries. They have returned to practice. Both are listed as questionable, and their potential return on Sunday, we'll still use that term potential because we don't know yet, but their potential return on Sunday, both at the safety position, linebacker, obviously against a high-powered Eagles offense, obviously could provide this Packers defense with a really big boost. So Evan Williams suffered a quad injury in practice leading up to the Saints game back in Week 16. He's been sidelined since then. He did return to practice this week for the first time since that injury. Was limited all 3 days. He's listed as questionable. However, noteworthy, Packers released their transactions on Saturday, and Saturdays are typically when you'll see players from the practice squad elevated to the 53-man roster for Sunday's games, or you'll see players who are maybe out of practice squad elevation signed to the 53-man roster. The only move the Packers made was adding Sean Clifford to the roster to be available for Sunday's game as the emergency quarterback. But what that tells us when it comes to Williams, and then we'll get to Quay Walker as well, but the last few weeks as the Packers have been shorthanded at the safety position, they've elevated Omar Brown from the practice squad to the game day roster to just provide depth at that position. They didn't do that this week, and I know Brown's out at practice squad elevations, but they do have an open roster spot still where they could have signed him to the 53, had him available for Sunday's game. So, again, we don't know for certain at this time, but I would say that that is, at the very least, quite noteworthy when it comes to Evan Williams' status. Now, let's get into the potential impact that Williams could have in this game. Over the last few weeks, as Williams has been sidelined, he's done everything that you need to do as best you can in that situation when you're not on the practice field, you're not playing on Sundays, to stay involved, right? That's still going through the same preparation process as if you were playing in the meeting rooms. It's being a sounding board in the practice, in the meeting rooms, on Sundays, on the sidelines for Zane Anderson, Kitano Ladapo, who are getting those starting reps while you're absent. And this aspect I really love, and it's not just Williams, but Ryan Downer, the defensive backs coach, talked about how the Packers did this with Zane Anderson as well. But during practice, while Williams, again, was not participating these previous weeks, as the starting defense is on the field going up against this Packers scout team offense, Williams is he's about 50 yards behind the play. So again, there's quite a bit of distance there, but he's going through, right, the motions, the checks, the calls that he would make, and trying to give himself that perspective, trying to put himself in that situation as if he were back on the field lining up next to Xavier McKinney in those practice situations, just doing as much, again, of those little additional things that you can do along the way while you're sidelined to stay engaged, to stay involved, to make sure that you're doing as much as possible to make sure that when you get back on the practice field, when you get back on the field on Sundays, that you haven't taken a step back during that time that you've missed. So I just love that little nugget, that little peek behind the curtain, right, in terms of just some of the additional factors, things that go into play while you're sidelined with an injury and as you're trying to stay involved. And when it comes to the Packers secondary as a whole, not having Williams obviously been a key aspect of it, but there's been a lot of movement due to injuries in the back end of that defense for Green Bay. I mean, we've seen over the last month, no Javon Bullard, right? So that then forces Keyshawn Nixon from the boundary to the slot. You're now relying on both Carrington Valentine and Eric Stokes instead of just Valentine. We've also seen in that Minnesota Vikings game where Zane Anderson had to exit early, Javon Bullard had to move from playing the nickel. Now all of a sudden he's back playing free safety. Two completely different positions, by the way. A very, very big jump for any player, let alone a rookie, to make. Because as we've talked about on here before, going into the week when there's limited reps, limited practice time available, and Javon Bullard is expected to be the starting nickel. That's what he's practicing, right? Like, he's in the safety room for meetings. He's doing everything he can off the field to make sure that if that situation arises, that yes, he knows the responsibilities. But it's one thing to know on paper, all right, here's what we do in these looks, and it's another thing to go out there and execute it. So that's a big jump, again, because he's not getting those safety reps. But he had to do that against the Vikings in that game because of injury. And like I said, we've seen Zane Anderson next to Xavier McKinney. We've seen Kitano Dapo next to Xavier McKinney. So there's been a ton of movement. But if Evan Williams can return, can be available on Sunday, there's continuity, right? Everybody goes back to the positions that they largely played this season. Of course, Williams will be next to McKinney. Bullard goes to the nickel. Keyshawn Nixon is on the boundary. And then they have Carrington Valentine opposite of Keyshawn Nixon as he's taking control of that cornerback rotation that was originally going on with Eric Stokes. So just that that element in and of itself, I think is a really important factor. And Ryan Downer touched on just the, over the long haul, having the same guys game in, game out, practice in, practice out, snap in, snap out, how just the added feel that there is, right? Knowing exactly what the player next to you is going to do, knowing the communication component of all of it, having understanding of where this player is going to be, because you just have that continuity, that feel of playing next to them, and just that understanding. And sometimes I think unspoken understanding, right? Like, look at offensive line play. We talk about the importance of continuity all the time, especially when you're passing off blocks, or how you handle stunts and twists, right? There's just a built-in confidence of having those reps over and over and over and over again, that even as you pass off a pass rusher, you just know that the guy next to you is going to be there because he's going to be operating within his responsibility. So I think there is a very, very, it's not everything by any means, but I think it is an important factor when it comes to play in the secondary, that continuity component, just having that cohesiveness of everyone being where they're largely have spent most of the season. So there's that element to it. We also got to take into account, of course, Evan Williams' play when he's been on the football field. He's been a very sound tackler. According to Pro Football Focus, when targeted, he's surrendering a completion rate to opposing quarterbacks just 56%. He's limiting big plays, holding pass catchers to just 10.2 yards per reception. He's got 2 pass breakups, an interception, and opposing quarterbacks have a passer rating of just 69.7 when targeting Evan Williams. And then there's also the communication component of it as well. Evan Williams in the safety position as a whole, Xavier McKinney, their impact starts before the ball is snapped. They're there on the back end communicating, making sure the cornerbacks, everyone is aligned as they're supposed to be in the back end of the secondary. They're making adjustments based on what the offense is doing. Again, communicating that out, making sure everyone's on the same page, adjusting responsibilities as needed. And Jeff Hafley talked about this on Thursday, but again, we've heard him compliment Evan Williams' ability before, and just his intelligence, right? Because of what Evan Williams brings in that regard, and that communication component, and just the workload that you can say, here, Evan, go handle this, and trust that he's going to go out there and execute at a high level. That then takes someone off the plate of Xavier McKinney, right? He doesn't have to do it all on the back end. And then that frees up Hafley and McKinney in terms of how he's utilized and the responsibilities, the roles that he has. His scope of what he can cover becomes greater because there's less on his plate, so he can do more, right? So there's a big trickle-down effect. Again, before the ball's even snapped, from a game plan perspective, a communication perspective pre-snap, that comes with having Evan Williams on the field. Now, of course, opposite of the Packers secondary, the Packers defense is a very, very high-powered Eagles passing game, arguably the best receiver duo in football in A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith. Combined this season, the two have just shy of 2,000 receiving yards, 155 receptions between the two, 15 touchdowns. There's Dallas Goedert at the tight end position. Saquon Barkley, not just as a runner, but the Giants do get him involved in the passing game as well. And that collective offense is coming into the postseason 4th in yards per pass attempt. And I do like that statistic because I believe it shows, one, the efficiency of an offense, and also just the big play potential that's there. And that's what the Packers secondary is going to be up against this week. And Evan Williams, again, there's no cure-all when going up against that type of offense with just so many different ways that they have the ability to beat you. But he did talk about the importance of trying to be physical with those pass catchers, not letting them get those free releases, not letting them get into the routes. Try to your best ability to disrupt the timing, the rhythm of the passing play. But again, it's one thing to say, it's a completely different thing to go out there and do it. So the roles of Williams and McKinney in this game, again going up against two really high-powered wide receivers and just a high-powered passing game as a whole, going to be really important, right? Making sure everyone's set, getting the communication on point, providing help over the top to those cornerbacks, because Valentine, Nixon, Stokes, who's ever in there, they're going to have some really, really difficult matchups. And Williams, McKinney being positioned well to help out is going to be a critical factor in this play, and hopefully limiting the big play potential of this Philadelphia offense, because obviously not just this week, this is every week, but limiting those big plays is obviously an important factor for every defense. And like I said, Eagles offense, they have a variety of different ways that they can beat opponents, right? That's the challenge. You can do your best to take away one element of that offense, and maybe you do, but there's three other different ways that they can still attack you. So big test for the Packers. And again, the pass rush is going to have to help out this Packers secondary. They're absolutely going to have to. You can't ask your cornerbacks, with or without Jair in the mix, you can't ask them to have to defend this group of receivers for 4 seconds consistently. It's probably not going to end well. We can look back at that Vikings game. What happens when your pass rush doesn't go home against a very, very talented offense? A lot of yards are given up. So pass rush is obviously going to have to be an important component of this. But again, Packers being buttoned up on the back end, another really critical factor as well. And getting Evan Williams back will obviously help with that. All right, lastly, before we get out of here, we'll talk about Quay Walker, who, again, has missed the last few weeks. He exited the Seattle game in Week 15 with an ankle injury. Hasn't played since then. This past week was his first time being back at practice. And like Williams, he was out there all 3 days, but in a limited capacity. And he's listed as questionable. Now, early in the week, I think it was Monday, coming off of that Bears game, Matt LaFleur did say that he was, at that time, optimistic that Walker could be available for this game. Obviously added the caveat that they would have to see how he progressed throughout the week. But, again, similarly to Williams, last week in that Bears game, we saw, not again knowing that Quay Walker wasn't going to play, we saw the Packers elevate Michael Barrett, linebacker from the practice squad, who have available in that game against the Chicago Bears. They did not make a practice squad elevation at the linebacker position for this Philadelphia game. Again, potentially a sign that Quay Walker is going to return to this Packers defense this week. And I know he's had his ups and downs, not just this season, but throughout his career as a member of the Green Bay Packers. But what we haven't seen yet, and there's the potential for us to see on Sunday if he's available, is the version of Quay Walker that we saw before the injury, because he was playing some really, really good football. I think you could arguably say the best football of his career during that 3-4 game stretch. We haven't seen that version of Quay Walker paired up with the current version, the do-it-all splash play version of Edgerrin Cooper that's currently out there for the Green Bay Packers. Those two abilities did not overlap each other, right? Edgerrin Cooper's first game back from injury was that Seattle game, and that's the one that Quay Walker got injured in. So just the potential to get those two at the linebacker position in the middle of your defense paired together, if the Packers get that, huge boost for this defense as a whole. And like I said, that 3-4 game stretch for Quay Walker prior to the injury, he was playing some really, really good football. According to Pro Football Focus, from weeks 12 through 14, Walker ranked second among all linebackers in pressures. Was doing a really, really good job when asked to blitz of getting after the quarterback. He totaled 20 tackles during that stretch as well, fifth most among linebackers during that stretch of games. And I know tackles can be, especially at linebacker position, can be a misleading stat, but I think what bolsters that and shows the effectiveness of Walker in those games and the plays that he was making was that he also ranked seventh, again, during that 3-game stretch in stops, according to Pro Football Focus. And a stop by PFF's metrics is a play that constitutes a loss for the offense. So say it's 3rd and 4, and they do a dump-off play, and the running back picks up 3 yards and is tackled short of the first down. Offense then has to punt. That would be a stop for that player, right? Yes, there were 3 yards surrendered, but he didn't let them get the first down. The offense is off the field and a punt has to be made. So Quay Walker had 11 stops, again, 7th most among linebackers during that span. And a big part of the catalyst, I think, behind that level of play that we were seeing from him is just confidence. Jeff Hafley also praised his Walker's preparation level as well during those couple of weeks, and just how locked in he was, both on the practice field, in the meeting rooms, all those different aspects. And Anthony Campanile, the Packers linebackers coach, talked about the progression, right, for the linebacker position. Your eyes, your feet, and your hands all working together as one, and highlighted that he really started to see that from Quay Walker. And I think that comes with, again, getting those live reps in a new scheme and in the Mike linebacker role. Again, I don't think we can overlook that element to all this as well. It's been a big learning curve for Quay Walker. And Xavier McKinney, I think it was after the 49ers or the Dolphins game, he talked about where there were times when he was with the Giants where he did have to wear the green dot, and he just talked about how that's a lot on that player's plate, right? You're getting the call, you're relaying the call to the defense, you're making the checks, you're adjusting everyone. Now, as the offense shifts before the ball snap, you got to make sure that you get your guys shifted and all on the same page as well. Then you got to go out there, read and react to whatever's happening as the play unfolds, get back up, start that process all over again. There's a big steep learning curve that comes with that. And I just think as the season's gone on, as Quay's gotten more comfortable with that responsibility, gotten more comfortable with the Jeff Hafley scheme, his role, his responsibilities, the responsibilities of those around him within that specific scheme, and then seeing how opposing offenses, right, are attacking the Green Bay defense. And then, again, once you get those banked reps and start to see things over and over and over again, obviously you're going to know how to respond in those specific situations. You're going to know how to react. You're going to react a lot more quickly. We're going to see that fast physical play that we've heard Jeff Hafley talk about since he arrived in Green Bay. So I think it's all those different off-field components, elements to just being comfortable in what he's being asked to do. And the result of that is you're getting confident and really good play from Quay Walker. Now, of course, the challenge is going to be, after having missed that chunk of time, several weeks, trying to pick up where he left off. Again, that's obviously going to be a challenge that he's going to have to overcome this week. But I think Packer fans, if he's going to be available on Sunday, and I hope that then the Packers would continue to play Edgerrin Cooper snap count wise at a high level as they have the last few weeks. But I think just the potential of getting weeks 12 through 14 Quay Walker with weeks 15 through now Edgerrin Cooper, I mean, there's a potential for that to be a very dynamic duo in the middle of defense. And like we talked about with Evan Williams, obviously the Packers are going up against a very good Eagles offense. Quay Walker, linebacker position, really all 11 defenders, going to have to play a key role in doing their best to contain Saquon Barkley. Rushed for over 2,000 yards this season, averaged over or almost 6 yards per rush. Obviously from those numbers, as you can tell, he was the best in football at the running back position at generating big plays. And the Packers' run defense, not going to get too deep into this. I think you can go back a video or two ago and we dive deeper into the Packers' run defense versus the Saquon Barkley and the Eagles' rushing offense. But Packers' run defense finished the regular season ranked 3rd in yards per carry on the year. And again, it's the catalyst behind that. It's all 11. It starts with the interior defensive line, but it's all 11 defenders being on the same page when you see a steady, productive run defense. Now, from a passing game perspective, again, the run game component, Quay, the linebacker position, shedding blocks, filling gaps, getting horizontal to stop the ball carrier from being able to turn upfield on those boundary runs, all critical elements, roles that he's going to have to fill, things that he's going to have to do in this game to help out the run defense. From a passing game perspective, and going back to that Week 17 game against the Minnesota Vikings, Packers were picked apart over the middle of the field. Sam Darnold in that game, between the numbers, completed 85% of his throws for 289 yards and 2 touchdowns. I mean, he and that Vikings offense were lights out, and pretty sure we did a video on it. Also have an article up over at ESPNlacrosse.com dissecting what went wrong in that game. And as always, there's a number of different factors. There is no one thing that went wrong for the Packers that contributed to those issues. But one of the factors, the contributing factors to those miscues, was the linebacker position. And what Matt LaFleur highlighted specifically was the coverage miscues, specifically the linebackers not always getting the depth that they needed, right? They're a little too close to the line of scrimmage in some of those situations, which created a big amount of space behind them, between them and the safeties, and there was a lot of openings then for the Vikings, for Darnold and the Vikings pass catchers to then take advantage of. That's just one example of it. But as promising as Edgerrin Cooper has been, as high as his ceiling and as fantastic as all those splash plays are, still a rookie, right? He's still navigating the learning curve. He's dealt with injuries throughout the season, which has resulted in missed time, right? So he's had to kind of restart on a few different occasions throughout the series. He continues to reacclimate himself. So there's still a learning curve that's a part of that. And then in that game as well, you're relying, because you don't have Quay, you're relying on Eric Wilson, Isaiah McDuffie as well. And there were instances where the linebackers were really, really close in coverage, really, really close to forcing a pass breakup, really, really close to making a tackle that ended up being yards after the catch, but they were just off. And you'd have to wonder, and this is just speculation at this point, but you have to wonder if you have Quay Walker in the middle, right, and you have his speed, his athleticism, are some of those coverage responsibilities, again, because he was operating at a high level, are some of those coverage responsibilities a little bit more shored up? Are some of those passing windows that were open, do they get closed because of his ability to cover ground? Are some of those yards after the catch opportunities limited because he's in a position where, again, going back to his speed and athleticism, he's there to make a tackle? And again, not to say that would have changed the outcome, the course of the game. Of course, I'm not saying that whatsoever. But it's those little things here and there, a play here, a play there, like we've talked about, that can add up over the course of the game. And so, again, if you can get that version of Quay Walker, and I know I keep referencing it because we got to see it again, but if you get that version of Quay Walker out there, I think there's a potential to really help out this Packers defense. If you made it this far in the video, you might as well hit like, you might as well hit subscribe on the YouTube channel. I greatly appreciate it. You can find all my work over at ESPNLacrosse.com. Follow me on Twitter, Paul_Brettel. Download the 105.5 ESPN Lacrosse app for all your Wisconsin sports radio needs. And until next time, friends, take care.